think there's a very dramatic shift in the number of opportunities for private equity in Japan over the past decade, and that's really being driven by demographic changes. So as you know, Japan is an aging population, and so today 27% of Japanese are 65 years old and above. And so the implications for that are that owner-operators of businesses are now looking for alternatives for their business. And the statistic that's also quite interesting is that of the 3.8 million entrepreneurs that exist in Japan, the average age is 60. The second thing is that 2/3 of the time they don't have a chosen successor. So what ends up happening is that they have family discussions on the weekend, and they decide, that maybe we should sell the company. So last year alone, there were over 2,500 M&A transactions that took place. It's probably one of the top 5 markets in the world for M&A, and they tended to be largely $100 million size companies that were family owned. Well, NSSK focuses on small to medium-sized enterprises, and 80% of our investments will be in family-owned businesses. And so when you're dealing with the smaller segment of the market, the larger macroeconomic environment and things that are going on around the world, whether it be Brexit on the one hand, the American presidential elections, have less of a direct impact, so we're not seeing any visible changes in terms of the demand and supply of our businesses at the customer level from any of these things, because of the somewhat insular nature of the businesses. And many of these small to medium-sized businesses basically are focused on local regional economies, which are quite large in Japan, as you know. 80% of our transaction volume will be business succession oriented, where we're dealing with families and owner entrepreneurs, and maybe 20% will be carve-outs from large industrial corporations. And that's not by accident, that's more by design. So we have organized our sourcing capability to be in the regions, working with regional banks, regional brokers, regional accounting firms, regional law firms, and that's how we source these transactions. And many of these companies and entities have relationships with privately held companies. Yeah, no, it has historically been severely underserved and underpenetrated because most of the capital that was raised in Japan was targeted toward the larger cap space, and the whole concept of corporate divestitures was the theme for the past 10, 15 years. Unfortunately, that didn't really come to fruition, although things are changing with corporate governance. But the whole middle market phenomena is something relatively new, as I described earlier. That entrepreneur that I discussed 10 years ago was 50. So that entrepreneur is still way too young to sell a business. But now at 60, still young 60, but with no successor, and with typically leverage that is guaranteed personally by the family, they are make an economic decision to sell their business. And so now is the time. And so we think that over the next 10 years there's going to be increasing middle market transactions, and the private equity is a very, very attractive solution for these families. Yes, yeah, it's really being embedded into the local communities around Japan. So not just being in Tokyo, but spending time in the various regions. As you know, Japan is a $5 trillion economy, right? So you go to Nagoya, where Toyota is based, that's a $900 billion economy. You go to Osaka, that's a $1 trillion economy. And so to source these kind of deals, you really have to have local networks. And so we have built relationships with local brokerage firms, local accounting firms, local tax attorneys. And they're the major source of transactions for NSSK. These are relationships that we've had in some cases 10 years, other cases 20 years, and from our former lives. And so it's important. Relationships are valued very highly. Trust and confidence is something that you earn, right? We try to take advantage and leverage the fact that we have these very strong relationships throughout Japan.